Bold Bytes, your bite-sized guide to payments.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Bold Bytes. I'm your host, Robert Copeland, and here on Bold Bytes, we're diving deep into the fascinating, ever-evolving world of merchant processing. If you have ever swiped a card, tapped your phone, or clicked buy online, you've interacted with the processing industry. It's the invisible engine that powers commerce, and today, we're going to pull back the curtain and explore its inner workings. We'll talk about the latest trends, the biggest challenges, and the most innovative solutions shaping the future of payments. Whether you're a seasoned industry pro or just curious about how money moves in the digital age, Bold Bytes is your go-to source for insights, interviews, and analysis. So buckle up, grab your headphones, and get ready for a bold bite of knowledge. I'm particularly excited about today's episode because we have an absolute stellar guest to help discuss risk and compliance with us today. If there is anyone that can make risk and compliance both fascinating and accessible, it is Stephanie Buckley. Stephanie, it's fantastic to have you on Bold Bytes.
Thank you for having me.
I'd love to hear your story. How did you end up in the payments industry and in particular doing risk and compliance?
It's actually a funny story. Gary Liu, who started Bold, he reached out to my ex on LinkedIn and offered him a job. And I dove in and got the job instead. So I started working with, back then it was Priority Integrated Solutions in June of 2021. And luckily I was coming straight out of school. So I had a little bit of a student mode in me. So all I wanted to do was learn as much as I could. And luckily, that's what I did. I just kept learning until I got to be the person that if a problem couldn't be solved, it was handed to me to solve it. And I've been mostly in client services while I've been at Bold, but recently shifted over to a strictly risk and compliance role. So I am the one who is making sure that all of the bad things go away.
You know, I was on my way driving in this morning and thinking about this episode. As I was sitting in traffic on 285, I looked over and I saw a cop that had a car pulled over. And it kind of dawned on me that there's a lot of similarities between the police and risk. When you start to drive, you go to the DMV and you have to fill out a form and provide 2 forms of identification. I don't know about you, but I usually, lie a little bit and say I'm 5'7", 5'8", lower my weight a little bit. But basically, the DMV is verifying my identity. And I see that very much like underwriting. When a business goes and signs up for merchant processing, they're verifying the business. From there has to be someone that kind of polices it or regulates and makes sure that, it's not the wild, wild west. When I do get pulled over and it's, hey, don't you have something better to do? Why are you bothering me? Right? But as soon as my house gets robbed, I want the police there to help me. And so I kind of see risk as the same. I think a lot of businesses see risk as a pest, but when they need them and they don't really understand what they're there for, they want them there. What do you think about that?
No, I absolutely agree. Risk is, for the most part, perceived as the bad guy in every situation. But in terms of an account being boarded under identity theft, they're the ones that are catching something like that and notifying the proper people so that the person who was affected by that identity theft can now protect themselves further, freeze their credit, make sure that their accounts are safe moving forward. So I completely agree with that statement that they're going to be the pests when you want to just have everything run smoothly, but the moment you need them, they're going to be there regardless. They're going to be protecting you, whether you're the one who's experiencing the fraud or you're the one that's doing the fraud. They're going to protect whoever is involved in it.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people forget that, risk is an entity there to help protect the customer. They do have an interest for the banks and the processor, but it's also on behalf of the merchants, right? And so we've seen examples of people fraudulent bank changes, someone trying to change a bank account, not be the owner. And that's when you're thankful for, right? So what are some of those common risk items that you see on a day-to-day basis?
For the most part, what I see is when a merchant is boarded with specific parameters that they agree upon. So, a specific monthly volume or an average ticket size, or whether or not they'll be keying sales. And somewhere along the way of them processing, they deter from that original agreement and their behavior starts to show something that risk now needs to keep an eye on and may be a cause for concern. Situations like that I've seen a lot with maybe package stores or cigar stores that are tobacco stores that they signed up for 100% swipe sales and they start keying transactions and risk will jump in. They want to know what's going on. Sometimes it's as simple as a merchant's terminal went down and they're keying sales while they're waiting for their replacement to come through. Other times it could be possibly fraudulent activity where a person comes in with a credit card that is not theirs and can't actually be swiped or chip inserted. So they say, oh, it's not working. And they key the transaction and then they're able to dispute it and charge it back later. So that's something that I see a lot of. Also, large transactions. So if a large transaction, whether keyed or not, comes through, risk will usually reach out, especially if it's outside of their normal behavior, because just like you said, they're not only protecting the merchant, in case it's a keyed sale, it could be charged back and they would lose that sale. Or if it's the customer, maybe the customer doesn't know that that's what they were purchasing. Maybe there's no invoice that states that they were purchasing $17,000 worth of goods and services. So risk reaches out just to gather the information and verify that all parties involved with this transaction have agreed to the terms and the payment is received for something that they agreed upon.
You hit on a couple important areas there that I want to dive a little bit deeper into. So the first thing I heard is you want to make sure that when you're doing your application, that you're describing your business as accurate as possible. Don't do what I do and lie about your height and your weight, but actually, right, what kind of sales do you do? Put your right percentages of keyed versus swipe or chipped. That's really where it starts, right? Is making sure that you classify your business correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And not trying to go around certain parameters just because you want to be approved quickly. The worst part is when you get started processing and your funds get held. It's probably a lot easier to have it get held up in underwriting when they have a chance to determine whether or not that's a relationship they want to move forward with. Especially when it comes to maybe high tickets. If you're a restaurant and your normal ticket size throughout 10 months of the year is $250, great. But maybe let us know that, November and December, you normally do private parties or that you have a group that comes and buys out the restaurant every January for their holiday party. Something like that is a great way to mitigate those risk reviews in the future.
So I know one of the things that we hear a lot from customers is, hey, my old processor didn't do this. They didn't question me or ask for these invoices. Can you maybe explain a little bit of why, when you switch that processor, that now they might be getting asked for that?
Risk is a relationship. So when you first get started processing and you fill out an application, to the processor, you are merely a name and some numbers on a piece of paper. They don't know that you are the go-to local butcher for the last 75 years, that you have a relationship with every person in your town. They don't know any of that information. They only know what you've given to them. So you might be with a processor for a very long time and they've witnessed the growth in your business. They've understood that you have some days where you're not doing great or some months where you're not doing great and some months where you're selling out of your product every single day. And they understand that. They grow to know that about you. When you switch over, they know nothing. And so they have to learn to build up that relationship. So you're not going to marry somebody you just met, but you are going to be willing to go on a couple of dates and learn more about them.
No, I think that's a great way of putting it. That's really what risk is trying to understand is once they see that, oh, hey, this is legit, we verified it, eventually they probably will stop even asking for those invoices. It's just we have to this is a new relationship. We're not going to go straight to marriage. We got to date and get to know each other first. What is the best advice for businesses when they do have, say, an abnormal sale that they might be doing, or that large catering? Is it best to notify the processor ahead of time, or is it best just to, make sure you have your documents so that if they ask, you're ready to give it to them?
I would say that making sure you have your documents is probably the best. Reaching out for every single large transaction that you do through the holiday season might be taxing on you and might not be something you want to consistently put into your practice. But at least having the information to protect yourself. I also recommend do not key any large transactions. So, if you can swipe, if you can chip insert, do that. But just gathering the information, making sure that there's an invoice that not only states exactly what was purchased, when the delivery date of that purchase was, how payment was received. Anything along those lines is a great way to start. And with the way that our processors work, they have a back-end system where they're able to verify cardholder information to ensure that the card that's being used matches the person who's stating that card is theirs. And so basically, there's always three pieces of information that Risk will ask for, which is the cardholder's full name, their billing address, and their phone number. And they're able to insert those three pieces of information into a back-end system with the card number and verify whether or not that information belongs to the card. If it's something where it's very, very, very far out of your realm, maybe you're a walk-up counter service and someone randomly came in and said, "Hey, I want to buy out this place for a Saturday for my wedding," and that's not something that you even come close to normally do, letting us know about it would be great, just so that we can make sure we're keeping an eye out for it and we can help you get ahead of any information that we think you might need. Because depending on the variables of the transaction and the account depends on other information that Risk might ask for, like prior processing statements if you're a new account, or whether or not you're credit qualified by asking for bank statements.
And they could even just say, no, you can't do that transaction, right? So, that's kind of goes back to making sure that you classify your business. When you sign that merchant agreement, that doesn't mean you can just take a credit card if you want to sell your car.
Correct.
You're kind of limited to what your, MCC code dictates. And so that's another one that, especially around the holidays, you can sometimes see they start doing things that are very abnormal or not part of their normal business model. They got to remember that that's not who we started dating. And so there could be some pushback from Risk. Let's take a pivot and bring in compliance. It's really trying to police or regulate on behalf of the card brands, right? And the card holders. I think this is something that we've seen at Bold Payments, a bigger increase of compliance issues. Want to pivot over to this and get your thoughts of compliance and kind of what are you seeing in the compliance world right now?
Compliance, just as you mentioned with the police and Risk, is there for a reason. And their reason, although a lot of people might disagree with the statement that's about to come out of my mouth, what they're trying to do is protect the cardholder. So when you go to a store and you purchase something and you know what it is going to cost because you saw the price tag on it, and you walk up and you say, okay, there's going to be this much sales tax on there, and then this is what I'm going to be purchasing. And then all of a sudden, a 4% fee that you were not expecting is placed onto your bill, and you're already in the process of paying it. Or you might have already paid for it and are walking out the door looking at your receipt saying, why was that $10 more expensive than I expected it to be? They're trying to protect the cardholders from having to deal with things like that, because that makes people not want to use credit cards.
Yeah, shady pricing,
Yeah, shady pricing. It makes them not want to use credit cards. It makes them want to abandon that system, go back to cash and check, make sure that they're keeping all their cash in their mattress and, saving up for a rainy day. And compliance is there to get people on the same page so that like, as you mentioned, communication, so that the communication is in place before someone agrees to pay for something. So if there is going to be a percentage fee added on to the end of the transaction, then you know about it beforehand. There's plenty of signs telling you that it's going to happen. There's even maybe a disclaimer at the bottom of your check that states that this is going to be taking place. And so the fee programs that we, make sure our merchants are compliant with, they're all put in place by the card brands to really protect the cardholder. And from the merchant's eyes, the card brands are trying to stifle the way that they do their business, are trying to harm them, when really they're just trying to make it a little more uniform so that if you're walking into a shoe store down the street and 10% is added to your check, and then you walk into the same shoe store 2 miles away and only 2% is added, well, you're now discriminating. You're causing people to feel like they can't go certain areas. So they're just there to try to make sure that we're keeping fees and additional costs for our customers tighter.
Or it's even, I know back in when I used to do a little bit of this in client services, you had businesses, for whatever reason, would take Visa and not MasterCard.
Mm-hmm.
That's not allowed. Or I remember a big one back in the day was minimum, saying you go to any gas station and you're going to say $10 minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that can only be for credit.
Correct.
And those are the items that, it is protecting it is making sure that the consumer is being protected. And the other difference that I see, though, in risk and compliance is when you're out of compliance, usually you're going to get a fine. Risk, they're more going to hold your money.
For sure.
Which, neither one of them is good. But, when you choose to ignore doing things in a compliant manner, you run a risk of getting fined. Do you see that they're issuing more fines nowadays? And I remember back in my days, right, you used to get a couple warnings, right? So the first time you wouldn't get a fine, maybe you'd get 2 or 3 chances, then they'd hit you with a fine. Are you seeing that kind of going away and they're just hitting people the first time?
Absolutely. The first time around, they have stated you're more than likely going to be getting a $1,000 fine for just your first warning, just because they're really trying to crack down on people issuing fees that are outside of the approved fee programs, especially for the major card brands like Visa, MasterCard. They want to make sure that you're following these fee programs, and they've sent out the flags, they've sent out the warnings, they've had the guy with the parchment come and hear ye to all towns across the country to let people know that this is something that needs to be changed. And now that they've given enough warning, they're going to start cracking down on people. So definitely the fines have started immediately.
How do they even get notified? If I'm a business, say, doing a non-compliant fee program, how is anyone finding out?
There's a few ways. So you could just be a customer who knows that is not the right way of doing things, and you can report it to your bank or to Visa or MasterCard directly. Other ways is I know certain card brands, they actually have secret shoppers. So if they get any type of wind or notification that a merchant is doing something that is non-compliant, they will send somebody in to purchase an item, see how it goes. If their receipt verifies the information that they got, then they will reach out to the issue or the sponsoring bank, to the ISO, and it'll trickle down until we reach the merchant and say, this is not compliant. You need to adjust it to a compliant program.
So if I have Stephanie asking me for this stuff and I'm a business, maybe I just, I just want to give you something, right? So I'm going to take a picture of a sign that's not even in my business, right? And say it's in my business. Let's say it's a secret shopper or something. Like, do they send those secret shoppers back to revalidate when after you've sent in stuff, or is it really just give them whatever to get them off your back and then you're going to be in the clear?
No, you betcha. They're coming back for you. So there's two things I've seen. One where they'll just give us whatever. And they say, oh, this is mine. Yep, go right ahead. Let Visa know. Visa will get that information. And then there's a couple of weeks time where they'll send somebody out and verify that what was provided is accurate and that is how their business is now running. If it's not accurate, you will get an additional fine, and that fine will start to raise. So instead of having the initial $1,000 fine, which you will have already received, you will now get a $5,000 fine for still not being compliant after the initial audit. So that's one way. The second thing I've seen is when a merchant says, well, you know what? I'm not playing along. Bye. I'm going to go to a different processor. I'm going to find someone else who's going to take my money. And they have every right to do that. They can do whatever they please, and that is their business and their decision. However, Visa does not follow merchants based on their merchant ID that is handed to them at a processor. They go by their tax ID, they go by their location. And so wherever you start processing, they will find you and they will continue giving you fees and fines until you become compliant.
I remember 5 years ago or something, we had a merchant that had switched over to Bold Processing, and they got a fine for, I believe it was minimum charge or something like that. And although it's the first instance with us, the reason they really got the fine is because their previous processor, they had the same issue. And they thought by just switching processing, hey, you kind of start back at zero. But that's not the case, So
Nope.
you can run, but you can't hide.
Wherever you go, there you are.
That's right. The other big thing with compliance is, I think, and this is where I think it's really it's tough for merchants. You have card bearing compliance. You also have your state, local laws. You got federal laws. For example, surcharging, is it 3.5?
Surcharging is no more than 3%.
So 3%.
And it can only be issued to credit cards. It cannot be issued to debit cards.
See, that's why we love having you. But in Colorado, I believe it's 2.7. If you're a business, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to your local and state laws as well. Those might overseed, or, in that example, although the card brands say 3% is okay, the state's actually saying, no, you got to do it at 2.7. There's another piece of compliance that I really just wanted to touch on briefly, because I've seen people getting fined for it more. And this is more something that I think no one really understands, but it's what happens on the back end, right? So you have this payment terminal that you're putting cards in. It's passing data over. If it's not passing over the right data, you could get fined for non-compliance on that as well, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Is that something that you think has been an increase? What have you been seeing in that landscape?
Well, I think I've seen a shift. For a while, what we were seeing were what we call data integrity issues, where basically the type of data that's being transferred or how the data is being transferred was causing fees to eventually come through. What we're seeing now a lot of is what they call TPE fees. So it's transaction processing excellence fees. And these are basically, it's specifically MasterCard in this circumstance, but MasterCard has noticed that there are certain types of transactions that are being input or not being taken care of at all. And it's causing issues because what they're seeing come through doesn't have any data to go with it. Some examples would be pre-authorizations that are pre-authed, and then maybe the payment is moved to the new transaction that's going to be ran, where the total of the card is, or the total of the transaction is being run, but that pre-auth is just still sitting there. And so sometimes it's voided or not, or it's zeroed out, so they don't think anything of it. Well, that information's still being transferred to MasterCard. And it's still information that they want answers for, because it started. Why did it not stop? Where did it go from there? There's no finished product. Another one I've seen a lot of is transactions that have tips, tip transactions coming from either a nail salon or a restaurant that are actually coming through as final sales and then having tips added on top of that. So whereas an authorization will come through as a initial reach out and then a tip can be added on top of it and then finalize the sale when the batch settles, these transactions are coming through as final sales that are then adjusted, which is just different information that's coming through. And they want answers as to why. And they're trying to get the terminal companies and the POS companies to adjust the way that their software is set up and their applications are set up so that that information is passed through correctly.
Yeah, and I think that's where I got my biggest issue with it is they're penalizing the wrong person.
Right.
In most of these cases, the restaurant owner, they can't fix it. It's not necessarily something they can do. It's on the point of sale software. Maybe it's on the EMV. I remember one years ago, some data integrity subfield 44 or something, and people were getting fined for it. And they were waiting on the terminal manufacturer to put out new software. That's probably one of the most frustrating ones is I feel that they're finding the wrong people. In that case, I mean, what do you do? Compliance would say, oh, we'll switch point of sale companies. Well, that's a lot easier said than done. So, I mean, what can you do as a customer if you get your merchant statement and you see that you've got this TPE fine on there?
Things I've noticed are, they say that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If they see these fines and they're not happy with these fines and they tell their POS provider or their ISO, whoever they're processing payments through, they start moving up the ladder. So one part of my position is to help communicate these issues to our vendors and try to figure out resolutions for them. So for instance, I've been actively working with one of our EMV reader companies that we work directly with and have been trying to get them to adjust their application and their software for the issue regarding the authorization versus sale coming through. So I'm working on that process. Other partners of ours, I've had conversations with them about, especially if pre-auths are the way that these merchants are getting fined. I ask them about how their system works and I get to the bottom of, do they have the ability with your POS company to delete or remove a pre-authorization, or is it just zeroing out? Where is the process going? And they're able to now think, because I don't know their software like they know their software. So now I'm able to have them think through what's being sent or what's not being sent when it's being zeroed out or when it's being voided. And now they're able to work with their dev teams and try to figure out the resolution for that part. In terms of what a merchant can do to prevent anything along those lines, unfortunately, I don't know for sure. I just know that what I've witnessed is they've gotten to the right people and those people are doing everything that they can to stop those fees from coming through.
I would say one of the things they could do is help get all of us on a phone call, right? We might not know their point of sale company. You might not know that point of sale company. Well, they can help facilitate that meeting, right? So that there can be a team effort.
Yeah.
There's certain buttons, I'm sure, you have your relationships where you can try to help, get things done or push it up the ladder. We can work together as a team to help solve those issues. But again, it's one of those things where switching processors is not really going to help. It's about bringing it up, and the payment provider that you work with, they're going to go to bat for you and help try to solve it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stephanie, it's been a very insightful conversation. We've covered a lot of information. I wanted to give you the last few minutes if there was anything else that you wanted to mention before we wrap this up.
Only thing I would say is if I'm reaching out, if I'm knocking on your door, it's probably for a reason, working together and communicating the merchant's situation to risk or to the processor is going to be our best way of getting through it as quickly as possible, as smoothly as possible. And, the more resistance, the harder it's going to be to complete the process successfully. I would just say that I promise you I'm not your enemy. I'm here to look out for you. let's get through the holiday season with as little hiccups as possible.
If you could just maybe, give out your cell phone number, so I'm sure everyone would love to have that. I just want to take a minute and say that it's been 4 years, I think we've been working together, and seeing you come in and just the growth, and you become that expert, that source of knowledge, and building the relationships and really fighting for our partners and their merchants, and how much of a pleasure it is to work with you every day. And thank you for joining us on Bold Bytes.
Well, I appreciate that, Robert. Thank you. I know most of what I know because of you.
Yeah.
So
I don't know about that one, but as good of a conversation as we could have about risk and compliance, just remember, they're not the bad people. They're there to help you and protect you. And communication. We will see you next time on Bold Bytes.
Bold Bytes, your bite-sized guide to payments.